Lucia already have a digital economy? Is it something that is new? It sounds like it's a new thing and that we should embrace, but do we have a digital economy?
Absolutely. I think we do have a digital economy. For years, people have been using digital technology to conduct business. It's an evolving business, it's an evolving technology. More and more, a computer is placed on everybody's desk. As a matter of fact, the cell phone is now the computer. And we've been seeing that for a very, very long time. What we have to do is actually build a better infrastructure that everybody can have access to the internet. Because the only means of access in that digital world is through the internet. And everybody needs to have access to the internet. But not only access to it, they should be trained in using the technology in order for us to see the real benefit and the real value in using a digital technology.
Now, is there greater advantage in a digital economy to the traditional one? Is there more resilience in that digital economy that we speak of?
Thank you. I will take a stab at this question by saying that traditional sectors, because just to add to what has been said before, the digital economy, most countries refer to it as the ICT sector, basically. So when you speak about the digital economy, traditional sectors can become more resilient, more competitive through the use and adoption of digital innovations, basically. So with the digital transfusion that is happening across the globe, permeating every single sector within an economy, changing the way we live, the way we work, learn, socialize, and so on, the traditional sectors can become more resilient. So I believe they are intertwined. They do not, the digital economy do not exist in isolation of its own. It's basically used to improve processes. You have online banking, e-commerce, the online banking replacing long lines at the bank. You have e-commerce versus visiting a mall, manufacturing, automation, and so on. So the list goes on. So even post-COVID, I believe that we'll see even more acceleration, more transformation with the digital economy, because persons have gotten a taste of what it's like to work from home, telework, and so on. So I think that they should be together. We should not be looking at them, separate. Or think of it as a digital economy and traditional one. So basically, they work together and they don't exist in isolation.
If I could just add on to something I think we indicated with regards to the infrastructure, having that infrastructure and that connectivity, I must say that St. Lucia is well on its way in terms of that digital economy, especially as we look at the government sector, in terms of what we have done, in terms of being able to provide that connectivity, both within the government as a sector and to the public. As part of the Division of Public Sector Modernization, we have a few initiatives that we have worked on, which have spoken in terms of access to connectivity. So that connectivity that we speak to. We have our GINet program, which is the government island-wide network, which basically is providing that public wireless network access across various communities. So we've done an initial phase where we piloted again across 5 communities, and we're now in the process of actually moving on to a second phase. And this was really based on I think in 2010 there was a population and household census which looked at the internet penetration rate in St. Lucia. And we noticed it was about 43%, and at that time it was concentrated in the Castries and Grosley area. So we had that urban-rural divide where we had persons in the south of the island who did not have access to the internet. So with initiatives like the GINet, then we are hoping to at least provide and kind of bridge that gap in terms of persons. So persons whom, although now you will have seen, especially now, I think with COVID, persons who may not have had internet connectivity, because you have your children who need to do online classes. So now, I mean, the penetration rate for internet is much higher, but you will still find persons who do not have internet and would rely on that wireless connectivity. And with regards to internally within government, the government is recently completed as part of the CASIP project, where we've implemented a dedicated fiber optic connection across 348 of the government agencies. So, and that includes schools, government offices, etc., to provide dedicated fiber and dedicated connectivity to these offices and these schools to allow us now to propel forward in terms of digital economy and move into that next phase. So in terms of, so I think, and going back to the question of resilience, I think that I would say when you look at the digital economy and even look at now what happened with COVID, really and truly when without the digital economy, without internet, without that connectivity, most persons will not be able to operate. Yeah. So most persons will have shut their door and they will have gone home. But because of that digitization, that internet, persons have been able to work from home, businesses have been able to at least provide for that online platform where persons could make payments and continue business to some extent. So I would say definitely say that as we move forward, there are more avenues in terms of looking at the digital economy and that resilience as to what we can do.
You know, I wanna.
But you mentioned something just before about access to internet. What's the penetration like now? You said 43 when you did that survey before. What's it like
right now? I don't have the latest numbers, but like I said, based on what we have seen, especially now, like I said, in terms of being able to work from home, persons being able to work from home, that connected, persons completing courses online. Right now, you have quite a bit of persons who complete courses online. So as part of their university education, now for your student, for your kids at home, you require that internet. So we must say compared, I know that it's much higher. I can't tell you what it is like now. Hopefully that's something we'll be able to do a future survey on just to be able to measure. But
just to add quickly,
but Ian wanted to add.
Actually, it's kind of in support of something Pinkley said earlier about a better infrastructure. I think that though we may have a certain level of connectivity and penetration and so on, I think what COVID has also exposed is that we do not have a good enough internet infrastructure. The pressure on the networks have created problems and people have complained about the internet dropping, the internet being slow, right? I think, I've realized that the issues with even with Wi-Fi signals being crossing and causing problems in households. So it shows that we have a ways to go in really being able to support the type of thing that we're talking about here. If we're talking about people typically working from home or a greater focus on working from home, if we're talking about dividing the school day between morning and afternoon between students and students being at home working in the morning or in the afternoon doing their homework, we have to do better. It has to be more affordable and it has to be a more consistent, faster connection that we're experiencing right now.
Okay. But just to add to Sherilyn's point on the internet penetration, I think for now it will be very difficult to determine the actual number that we're looking at because the infrastructure also exists on a mobile device. So I know a number of people are using your hotspot on your mobile phone where you get data connectivity from your mobile provider. But to add to what Ian was saying with regards to the resiliency of the infrastructure, I totally agree that more has to be done to create a better infrastructure. And it's actually an opportunity for the service providers to recognize that it's time to step up. I know there's bandwidth on the island. There are several internet cables coming into the island, but it's expensive, and it all boils down to economics. So it's not subsidized there, so the service providers have to make a profit. They are in the business of selling internet service, so they have to be supported somehow to reduce the price so that it becomes affordable for everybody, sort of more affordable in Lucia.
What would a better infrastructure look like? Because I've heard from both of you, and I've been hearing it a lot, that we need to improve our infrastructure. It needs to be better. What would that look like? Is it that you want fiber in every household, that you have that level of speed, more than 100 megs per household and consistent? What would a better infrastructure look like? What needs to happen?
Fiber to the curb would be a beautiful thing. I think one of the service providers, I believe, bringing fiber to the curb as far as I understood, and that is the sort of bandwidth that people are looking for. Because right now on the internet, people are doing a lot more.
Yes.
As we can see for COVID.
All church services are online.
Church services are online. I mean, at the moment, Zoom has become a verb, right? Everybody is zooming on me.
Right, zooming.
Zoom is a verb, and that is a lot of pressure on the network, because that is video in real time. You know, you sit at a Zoom meeting, and at any point in time, there's 50, 60, 100 connections to that network. And when you're managing video on a network, it's a lot of bandwidth. It's a lot of demand on the network. So there is a need to increase the bandwidth, right? But more demand for it should push the price down, because you have volume. You know,
Right.
Yeah, because we've seen that before. I mean, we didn't have that access to Wi-Fi and to the internet and the speeds that we have, because the speeds that persons have at their home now, that's what businesses had before. And it was quite a package to have had it. So things will improve, I guess.
But
It brings you to
the content is different now.
you know. And I like to go back to my old days when we started. You know, I mean, it was a 56K modem. You know, 56 kilobits per second. A dial-up on your analog line.
dial-up.
You know.
Yeah.
So if you're downloading a web page, which in those days didn't have, you know, sort of all the functionality that we're seeing on the web right now, when you request a URL on the internet, you have to walk away and come back a few minutes later to see if it is downloaded. You know. So, but now we're seeing speed on the internet, and people see the internet as part of their everyday life. You know, and they want data at the speed of light. You know, data is now a commodity. You know, and to support that, we must have a very resilient network that is fast and reliable.
Indeed.
Especially if we're asking people to work from home. You know, social distancing will be around for a long time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we're asking people to subscribe to government services online. We're asking people to start engaging in e-commerce. We're asking all of those things. We need to have the resilient network to be able to support those things. Otherwise, the experience of the user will discourage them.
Now, you mentioned something that allows me to segue to Sherilyn, that access to government services. And I know that government has been working for quite some time, and they're in a ready phase to execute the program. So Sherilyn, the DigiGov project, could you tell us some more about that and how that will impact St. Lucia and also the way we do business?
Okay, so with DigiGov, what is happening is basically a web platform where we are going to be placing approximately, I think, about 154 government services online, and allow persons to submit digital applications and payment online. So instead of having persons come into the offices, etc., they could do that from the comfort of their home using their mobile phones, their desktops, their laptops, etc. And really and truly, it's making government services more convenient to persons. And we are hoping that persons will really take advantage of it as we look at the different services that we provide. So we look at things like applying for your driver's license, applying for your passport, your marriage licenses, and it also is a wider reach, because right now in doing so, in putting those services online, you're also extending to persons overseas. You know, most times you have persons overseas who wish to, they have to actually travel to come down to St. Lucia to do those things. So in doing so, you're making it more efficient for persons to apply. The transaction time is quicker. And then there's this, I should say, interactive way of communicating with government. Online, providing that feedback, etc. Feedback will be provided to you, so you know when to come back and collect your whatever document that you've applied, etc. So it's really about taking government into this new era of technology, really taking advantage of what we call that digital economy. So
has COVID exposed the need for that service even more? Because remember, we had the 24-hour lockdown, then it was 10 hours, now we're moving to a shorter time. Has it exposed this, and is it that government will expedite those processes? Because we've been hearing for a while that this would be happening.
Okay, so I think internally within the division, we had that discussion, and I indicated that sometimes, especially when it comes to IT projects, I think that there's a misconception. Persons don't understand. A lot of people associate IT projects with computers. So you just go in, you implement a computer, and that's it. And persons really don't see the work that needs to go into the background to actually come up. And again, when you spoke of digital economy, what I was thinking of is really and truly is doing what we do in the traditional way, but doing it using technology to do it better. So when COVID came around, the first thing I said, to Marlon, who's the director, I said to him, can you imagine if at that the DigiGov platform was up and running already? Because at that point, a lot of, and I will speak later in terms of 311, which is the Integrated Citizen Contact Center, which also falls under our division. And we were getting lots of calls from persons asking, my driver's license is expiring, you know, and they wanted to go out. What do we do? And for for a period of time, I think the Department of Infrastructure was closed, and you were seeing the high demand for persons to be able to apply for those services online. So I think for us, we always understood the justification, and we saw the need for taking those services online. But I think COVID really exposed it, and I think it has brought about the exposure and has assisted with the change management that we need as we go about in terms of implementing the project. COVID kind of delayed our timeline, and we're hoping we're now on track, and we're hoping to very quickly, sometime towards the end of May, early June, to actually launch that first phase of the project. But really and truly, I think when it comes to COVID really has shown persons, and I think I have never in my life had access to so much information on ground provisions and fruits and vegetables and persons. So you see that demand for, you see so many persons selling things, and you realize, hey, this is the way to go. And for me, what I find most very difficult in terms of implementing IT projects such as DigiGov is that change management. To get persons to figure out, why do we need to do this? Because it's almost as if it's not broken. For some persons, it's not broken. Why are you trying to fix it?
So you've allowed me to bring Fiona in. and it talks about retooling. How do we get persons ready for this digital economy? How do we fully embrace it? Is it that the workforce needs to be retrained? How do we tailor the school curriculum to take advantage of it? And I know this is a bearing on productivity, because as persons get new skills within this economy, it will also help create those new jobs. So Fiona, tell us a little bit about the retooling that you think has to happen.
Okay, so we have to begin to think of the future of work. And as you said, as we have been discussing, that COVID has exposed a lot of those things to us. As we begin to embrace more fully the digital economy, and that embrace, or I would say that transformation that is taking place, is not really waiting for us, it's happening globally. And as more businesses adopt technology to improve processes, we need to be able to retool, to retrain our workforce, because digitizing entry-level or middle-level jobs would create the need for having new set of skills that for persons. So yes, one set of jobs will be replaced, but it gives the country the opportunity to retrain and retool persons to take on the new jobs that will become available. And so I guess we now need to begin to look at how do we change our or alter our curriculum, school-based curriculum, in order to make those changes. And how do we? And we have to start very early. We have to start right now. Basically.
Earlier than Sir Arthur. I know Sir Arthur has made radical changes
in
the program.
Much earlier.
Much earlier,
And we really cannot continue to hide our heads in the sand, because we need to redefine jobs. For instance, not only in the private sector, you need to redefine jobs in the public service as well. Mm-hmm. So this is happening very quickly, and we need, for Instant Lucia, we need to begin to embrace that change. We need to be able to encourage persons to be trained as well, because sooner or later, I remember the time when we used to say, okay, fine, for you to get a job, you need to have English and math. That's a long time ago. But now,
it's still a prerequisite.
But now you'll be told that you need to have certain digital skills in order to be able to get certain jobs. So that is very important as we embrace embrace the technology, businesses embracing the technology, and so on.
I think we need to, I think we really need to commend the Ministry of Education in terms of how quick they were able to come up with this basically school from home and provide education within that digital platform.
They were really forced into it as
they
well.
were forced into
And
it,
yes.
but I think that they did quite a good job
Yes.
in terms of really coming up with some kind of alternate coming into the school kind of thing. And I think that so far, in terms of the feedback, I mean, I remember hearing about it and hearing that, okay, classes will be done online, and I was like, yay, that's good, you know, because here we were exposing our kids at a much earlier level. And you'd find most students now, mostly all young persons have a smartphone, they know how to use it, etc. It's good to pique the interest in things positive. And like I said, I think we need to, like Fiona said, we need to go back. I remember when I was at secondary school, we didn't get introduced to IT until like Form 3.
I didn't touch a computer until I got to Apple.
Right. So yeah. So when I got to Form 3, that's when they just introduced IT, and it was just basic Microsoft Excel, Word, etc. We didn't delve into it as deeply in terms of looking at the different careers, etc. However, we really need to go back, and we need to start earlier. The schools need to look at career days, before lawyers, doctors, etc. But we now need to put that focus on technology and show students, because when ICT is such a it's so big in terms of all of the different jobs available in ICT, and we need to let students be aware of it and introduce them to it from a very early age.
I just want to make a point.
So
just a minute.
hold your points, because we're going to take our first break.
Oh, okay.
When we come back, we will discuss this, the type of jobs that are important, because it's good to say jobs, but what are the types of jobs that persons should now be thinking about? I have my daughter, and she's leaving Form 5 very soon, and when she starts thinking about what type of jobs that she wants, what are the best things to study? Because moving away from the traditional, I want to be a lawyer and stuff like this, so what type of jobs would you guide persons into? And also, when we come back, we'll have a video in line with what you mentioned about schools and how they've adopted. We have the principal of the Castries Comprehensive Secondary School who's going to tell us about the experience thus far with working and from working at home, students being at home, and how that has happened. When we come back, we continue our discussion on the digital economy.
We at war with a virus, ready to harm us. Panic is not the answer. We can win this together.
Often use hand sanitizer, better yet use soap and water.
We must protect each other if we are to beat this corona.
Together let us win this war. Be a soldier for St. Lucia. Together let us win this war. Be a soldier, together we can beat this corona.
So you don't become the next case. Avoid touching your face. I'm sure you've been told so. Handshakes and hugging are up. No, no.
Advice give you the please. Cover your mouth and your nose if you cough or sneeze.
Practice social distancing and avoid large social gatherings.
Together let us win this war. Be a soldier for St. Lucia. Together let us win this war. St. Lucia, be a soldier. Together we can beat this corona.
For further information, please contact the hotline at 311 or the Bureau of Health Education at 468-5349.
Welcome back. So before we even enter our discussion, we want to introduce Marva Daniel, the principal of the Castries Comprehensive Secondary School, where she talks about the experience thus far with working from home, teachers interacting with students, and the experience. So let's introduce this clip.
So whilst we are at home, our school is to some extent quite functional. We've been able, for example, to redirect calls to our school's mobile number, and coincidentally, I found out that it is free of charge. Usually it's $8, so we can receive calls even when we're not here. So we're trying at CCSS to be as functional as possible. The transition from being here offline and being at home online has not been very easy because it's a new modality for everybody. However, I must commend my school resource team who embraced this transition wholeheartedly and have committed to ensuring that all staff members, not just teachers, all staff members are being rolled in together at the same pace. We have embraced Moodle as our learning platform, and we have ensured that our students access the school's email account. So when we started off, we had 90% of our students on board. And throughout the following weeks, we were targeting those who were not accessing to find out why, and getting them on board was, our task. So we were tasked with that responsibility. Students who send me an email like never before, and I feel like I have been able to be in touch with my students more. Yesterday, for example, last night, I had at least 3 teachers guiding them through the process of creating an electronic signature, guiding them to upload the SBAs onto the OZ, which is the online registration system software for CXC, and just trying to de-stress them, because they're so overwhelmed with the new modality that sometimes it can be a little too much. So teachers are now upgraded, they're upskilled, and they are now able to use so many different platforms. We use Zoom in the initial stages, we use Zoom, but now we use Google Meet, which is free, which allows all of us to interact, with each other because we do have a Google account. So that's a 0-rated platform that everybody here can use. Our teachers have Google Classroom lessons with their students outside of Moodle. So again, like I was saying to a parent yesterday, when teachers are here offline, everybody's timetabled. Everybody goes to a class at a certain time. And you may experience an opportunity where a child needs, or a situation where a child needs more of your attention, or you notice that a child has not been reached. Now you have this opportunity to use another platform, not just the classroom one-on-one, but through this digital classroom, you can schedule to meet with this child and do more with this student. You can direct students now through Moodle, through Google, through whatever, to other URLs that are linked to our Facebook, to our Moodle, to our school's website, where the students can engage in additional learning activities. So right now, our students have a variety of learning strategies being put to them, and so our students are now a digital student. We're not just a CCSS student. We have revolutionized teaching and learning, and our students, based on what they have been saying, are loving it. The only thing is they miss the bacon cheese. They miss Betty, they miss Costa, they miss their friends, and that's expected.
Well, it looks like Catch is Comprehensive, at least from this example, has fully embraced this technology. Mm-hmm. And it leads to something you said earlier, Sherilyn. But we were talking before we left as well about the type of jobs. So if somebody leaves secondary school now, what would you advise them to go into to take full advantage of the digital economy?
Well, I think I can take this one. Right now, every single profession is tied back to the digital technology, digital space. I had an argument with my young son a few months ago, and he was saying, well, the only job in the world that robots will not replace is a lawyer. And I said, I don't believe you, because I suspect in a few years' time, some sort of robot will interpret the law. I believe this, right? But every single profession, from an electrical engineer, an auto mechanic, right now all cars are coming in with computer programs running them. Autonomous cars will not be an ordinary mechanic repairing those cars, yes, right? Self-driven cars I'm talking about. All the cars we're seeing right now have 3-4 computers in there. So there's very little profession I can think of that will not be tied back to technology.
So the roadside mechanic might be a thing of the past.
They have to retool.
You must retool.
And we're seeing that happening right now. The roadside mechanics are retooling, because new cars nowadays, you cannot diagnose the problem without some sort of a computer. An outboard motor has to be diagnosed with computers. So I believe the foundation has to be technology. And from there you step into whatever other profession you want to. You know? And that is why the school, at a very early stage, has to introduce computers, right, and digital technology to them. And Sharon, just to add to something you mentioned earlier, that the government was forced to, especially at the Ministry of Education, to implement measures and technology to facilitate the students. And I think sometimes we forget that implementing technology, you have to move at the speed of light. And that is what technology is all about. You know, and I have a difficulty in understanding why it's taken so long to implement certain technology within the government service. We have some very low-hanging fruits. You do not have to do everything at the same time. You know, it's a phased approach, but and that is one way of getting people accustomed to using the technology. We can't drop everything on them at the same time. So you have things like paying your driver's license. I'm renewing my driver's license. I'm not applying for a new driver's license. I should be able to go on the website, pay my driver's license, pay the government the $300, and I have a receipt, and I pick up a new card at my own time. Government will be able to collect money round the clock, because at the moment, 3 o'clock, government cash points are closed.
So yes.
And that makes government a lot more efficient. I do not think most people want to stand on a line sometimes for hours at the ministry paying a driver's license, and hence the reason people sometimes are not motivated to go and pay the driver's license. If you can make it convenient and easy for them, they would do it. Filing your income tax return should be a very, very simple process, and easy for everybody to use.
I think online, it's already online.
It's online,
Yes, it's already online.
That sort of
Now, before what
stuff.
you said there, just to add that question in now, that how lucrative can that digital economy be? How lucrative is it? I know that it's a lot of money goes through it, and I know that when persons look at it, it's more lucrative than the traditional sector. But how lucrative can it be for St. Lucia? Will it be a game changer, as you're saying, that outside of regular hours, government will still be able to collect revenue?
I just give you an example. I gave you the example, 24/7. On a Saturday, on a Sunday, government will be collecting revenue.
Yeah.
It's a disruptor.
Yeah, I mean, the actual statistics around that are enormous, right? I mean, if you look at the Digital Economy Report 2019, which I have here, right? In 2018, digitally deliverable services exports amounted to $2.9 trillion, right? Or 50% of the global service exports, right? In lesser developed countries, such services accounted for an estimated 16% of total services, right? And they more than tripled between 2005 and 2018. So the trend is that it is going up.
It's going up.
Right? It's going up, and it is a huge portion. I mean, 16% is not a small portion of your economy as far as digitally provided services are concerned. So, and if you want to look at our local example, I've been hearing this argument that we have low credit card penetration in St. Lucia, so we can't do a lot of e-commerce. But we forget we have high debit card penetration, relatively speaking. Yes, we have a number of unbanked persons in our nation, but let's look at what's happening. We have an enormous rise in U.S. mailbox services, right? Which demonstrates that people are buying stuff on Amazon and eBay, and Fashion Nova, and everything else right now. And it's coming down. Small consumer goods, people are buying cars online right now on their own. So we're spending an enormous amount of money, losing an enormous amount of foreign exchange to buy things that you can buy here, simply because people think it's cheaper and they're willing to wait. Right? Even if they can't necessarily return it easily, they will still buy it because in their minds it's cheaper. So people have the means and people have the motivation to spend the money in a digital economy using digital means. Right? When we want to travel overseas, we want to get a US visa, we don't complain about the fact that you have a long form to fill out to get your visa. We go online, we get the form, we fill it out, we submit it.
But just what you said there, if it is that persons are able to access probably cheaper, not so cheaper sometimes, goods online, doesn't it threaten the traditional economy? You have our providers down here who may be losing out, and that's why you have probably the buy local campaigns being so much activated.
Well, they don't have to lose out if they take advantage of a digital economy and they innovate.
It's the
They
modality.
don't have to lose out. Because you see, persons are set in the traditional way of doing things. This is no longer the status quo going forward.
Absolutely.
You cannot depend on the traditional economy alone. You need to now invest in ways. So you, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, etc., you may not have the skill set in terms of being able to promote your goods and services online, but there are certain companies or different options that you can avail yourself to in terms of providing, of having that digital presence. So the threat is only if we don't try to change. If we stay rooted in the old ways, then of course it would be a disruptor, as you indicate, and we will stay behind. But if you really want to catch up, the world is moving ahead. I think COVID has shown us the world is moving ahead. There's no turning back at this point. So really and truly is really left, like I said to you, for me, and I laugh about it now in terms of the example I gave about the produce and the fruits and vegetables. But here we have farmers or persons, and those persons in a short amount of time, some of them could do it, maybe they use social media, but lots of persons, in tutus, they would advertise it, and by the next time you hear, everything is done. Whereas, if they say, okay, fine, we can't go to the market, what do we do? Sit outside, sell the produce, you may still have that produce. But they cannot even meet the demand for the products that they have.
Because they have adjusted the way they do
because
business.
they adjusted the way of doing
Fiona, you wanted to come in on that
Yes,
discussion.
Right. So I wanted to, talk about the value of the digital economy from another standpoint from what Ian did. And so I can speak about it in terms of GDP. So from the very same report, Ian, that you quoted, the UNCTAD reports, talk about the value of the digital economy is 50% of the world's GDP. And we know the world GDP is about $85 trillion. So you can just begin to imagine how the value. China and the US accounts for about 40% of the value added in the ICT sector. Globally, when you think of employment, over 39 million jobs globally. Now, if you were to bring that down into our situation, our local environment, for us, the digital economy is proxied by the economic activity called communication and information services. So in 2006, value added was about $40 million in 2006, and this increased to about $94 million in 2019. So here's another indicator that shows that the digital economy is growing in terms of its share to GDP for St. Lucia. That itself is also growing and is also competing with other traditional sectors in terms of its share to GDP. Employment locally has moved from 981 persons in 2015 to 1,019 persons. So there is a lot of scope. And I'm saying this, and the interventions that we have made in the digital economy, I mean, we have made some interventions. We have to be fair. There have been some interventions, but not at the extent that we expect and not at the extent that we are doing right now, because you hear about the DigiGov project, you hear about the CACIP project, and soon we'll be talking, I'm hoping later we can talk about the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project that we're about to implement. So you could see the value if all of those things come together with the infrastructure that has to be put in place and so on. So there's tremendous value.
Fiona, just as you're on your feet, a question came in, and it leads to something you've just mentioned. And the person has asked, is there a policy or roadmap to develop the digital economy, and how easy would it be for the ordinary man to participate in the digital economy? Or will it be a case where a fortunate few can benefit and those without access will be left disadvantaged?
Okay, so I will answer this question. I will just say one thing. I'll just pass the baton over to Sharon, right? But I think there is a lot of scope for everybody to participate in this in the digital economy. I mean, like we said, there's so much disruptions happening. There is a lot of skills training. We have projects that are targeted skills training in the digital economy. Those projects they're coming on train, and people will be hearing more about it and to find out how they can take advantage of those initiatives that are coming up. So we have a lot happening, and in terms of the policy regarding the digital economy, I know that the Department of Public Sector Modernization is working on the ICT strategy. I'm just to add before Sharon come on, We recently did, for the NCPC, we recently did an assessment of the challenges that affect competitiveness in St. Lucia. And one of the challenges that came up was innovation and our technological readiness. And so as part of our competitiveness agenda, the digital economy is very high on that. And that is why I'm here today, because we're working very closely with the Department of Public Sector Modernization, as well as the Division of Innovation and the Department of Sustainable Development, in looking at innovation, science and technology policies, and so on. So, Sherilyn.
Okay, so with regards to the policy, the Division of Public Sector Modernization, we have recently, we have a national ICT and sectoral policy that we're currently in the process of reviewing. We started that review last year. And what we have done, we've actually broken up into various sectors. So we look at all the different sectors of the economy: education, agriculture, health, tourism, etc., etc. And what we're doing is really looking at how we can align these sectors to what is happening in terms of the digital economy. How can ICT improve what they do, enhance competitiveness, enhance growth, enhance innovation, etc. So we have this discussion is well on the way in terms of updating this policy. And as you can imagine, I'm assuming that even now post-COVID, what we've done already, we probably have to revisit it just to ensure, because the thing about technology, whereas before we could have done these policies for 5 years or 10 years, really and truly, we now start to we need to look at policies in light of the digital economy, 3 years, 2 years, because technology, it's changing at a rapid So we're really hoping that we've engaged the private sector, all the different sectors, in terms of contributing and providing that guidance in terms of how they see ICT benefiting their sector. And we're going to use this to come up with this national ICT and sectoral policy that we're going to then use in terms of guiding the government in terms of the different programs, etc., that can be developed for especially the persons like entrepreneurs, persons who really don't have, they don't know how to move forward into this digital economy. So this policy is just the start of discussions to come, but it's something that's underway.
How's the private sector involved?
Yeah, and that's why I figure it's a good time to introduce what Invest St. Lucia is doing as it relates to the Business Incubator and Accelerator Program. So at the moment, we are working with a number of agencies to develop a Business Incubator Program, and that would include a number of businesses within the service sector, manufacturing, and ICT obviously is one of the areas, the digital economy, one of the areas that we are placing a lot of emphasis on. And that is to take a business from birth and incubate them to be something, a business that is of significant in our market. We are actually looking at a number of issues affecting small businesses and how they can start. And one of the main issues is access to capital. We have a number of agencies on board with us as trying to assist in making sure capital is available. We are also looking at physical space for small businesses to exist and get the level of support that they need to drive the business forward, from marketing support, administrative support, accounting support. And I believe your entity is involved in working with us to develop that program. And I think it has a lot of potential to see a lot of small startup becoming something of significance in St. Lucia. That is what we've been lacking for years, where young people with brilliant ideas cannot take the business forward because of the lack of support that exists. And if we have a program in place right now to support the small businesses, the young entrepreneurs, those ideas will not die. We will be able to take it forward.
And I'm part of this National ICT Policy Working Group in the business committee. The business group is what I'm a part of. So one of the things I felt that was really, really important, we are a web development company, that's what I do. And I'm part of the business community as well. So that's very, very important to me that the actual ICT industry is developed in our country. This is one of the areas where we have a relative advantage or comparative advantage, where we don't necessarily need to be big to be good at ICT. unlike a lot of other industries and areas where you have to try to find some type of niche to have a significant advantage. But what ICT is concerned, it's not necessary that you have a 1 million person population for you to have very good ICT products to come out of it, because the technology is open to everybody to learn and to implement. So one of the things I feel is very, very important out of this policy is to work on developing ICT as an industry locally. We've been consumers of ICT products for a long time. We continue to be, and even right now with COVID, we've just become greater consumers of ICT.
So we're not
products.
innovators as yet.
No,
we have some persons developing apps. We have some persons.
We have
doing
some level of innovation. We have some people that we're not taking full advantage of as far as innovation is concerned, right? Maybe they don't have enough, they don't can market themselves well enough, or they don't get opportunities or whatever. But I'm as a former president of the ICT Association in St. Lucia, I can tell you that there are a number of innovative young business people, or not so young business people within the ICT sphere, who can do more than they're currently doing right now.
So what would they need? Is it the startups that is
exactly, and that is where the incubator program would come in.
Exactly, coming into
and
that.
support those innovative ideas, because it's actually a low barrier to entry, and you have access to a global market. But unless you're out there and people can see you, we are not able to take advantage of it. We should be able to export the services that we have right now. Ian, you're involved in developing your web applications and your mobile services. But at the moment, most people go out and they search online. They find a service provider. That service provider is actually in India or Vietnam.
Yeah.
But we have people right there in St. Lucia who can do exactly what is available out there. But there's a perception that it's not available and it's cheaper outside. So that is where the program will come in and support and advertise. I mean, we talk about buy local, but when we say buy local, we think of a lot of the physical goods, like the farming products, some of the manufacturing products, but some of those services are up to the standard that is comparable to what we get outside. And the other thing about the digital space is that most people, when they buy online, they really don't know where they're buying. You know, you go on Amazon and you really don't know who's fulfilling that order, right? For all you know, it's coming out of St. Lucia. And earlier, I think, Sherilyn, you spoke about people buying stuff online and there's a perception that it's cheaper outside. But we can be selling on Amazon, right? And people place the order online.
Is the know-how taking advantage of the opportunities and every
Absolutely.
opportunity that's available?
And that is where the incubator program is going to come in and train people, you know, expose that sort of technology to people. Take advantage of that sort of stuff. Something else that's also missing is...
Just before I forget, in terms of a point that you raised, Pinkley, in terms of having the services, well, we have companies like Ian, etc., providing those services locally. Something that came to my mind based on experience, and this is nothing to do with Imagine, just another local company providing a service. I think sometimes what I have found is that there's a lot of focus on technology in terms of, yes, they're providing a solution, but in some cases, persons have not done the necessary groundwork in terms of the proper business requirements to see how the solution that they're offering can support the business. So, and they don't have the skills to do it.
So
even at that point,
advice.
right? So, but you, because when you go into the systems component of it, because when you go into offer a product, really and truly, of course, you know, if you creating a product, you may, unless you're doing it for a specific company, it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. And you would find that, okay, fine, I've seen the system, it's good, it's working, it's functional, lots of advantages, I can use it in certain areas. However, when you look at it in terms of the business processes and to see how you can fit it into your business processes, you find that some of the companies don't have that skill set in terms of persons to be able to do that kind of business requirements and that modification and that guide and that analysis to allow you to modify it for your company. So I think what we need to do now in retooling, I think that even within our local companies, we now need to not only look at the technology part of it, but we have to look at the systems component. We need to bring in, because most persons they don't know anything about technology. So really and truly, persons know IT, a computer, they could use it, but they really don't know how they can use it to become more innovative, more efficient. They don't see that, they don't understand the
They just want to make
benefits.
money.
Yeah, they don't understand the benefits of having a management information system and understanding what it can do for you. So we rely.
But all of them need that level, because I'm looking at what young people are doing on the internet and just being bloggers and stuff, and I've looked at a number of the things that they've done, especially now we said that churches are online. I assist my church in doing things, and to see the technology and the young people that are on, and they're monetizing those videos, you know, because they're able to generate quite a bit of interest. Can't we do things like this from St. Lucia?
But you cannot switch in subject a little bit, but I wanted to make sure I touch on something that she said there.
Yeah, a bit different.
If you have different types of software developers, right? And some people are not really software developers, but integrators. So they may provide you with a pre-built solution that might not necessarily meet your particular needs.
Okay.
But developers do exactly what she says that it's supposed to be doing. Companies like ours and other developers here will do the analysis and come up with a solution to suit your particular needs. Now you might have those who might be building software platforms or one-size-fits-all that may not necessarily meet everybody's needs. And some are not actually the ones who build the applications at all. And they cannot modify it, right? So we need to understand that it all depends on the type of company that you're dealing with or the type of individual that you're dealing with. But I will tell you, I guarantee you that we have companies here who can build custom solutions to meet the needs of private sector and public sector.
So
right?
all they need is probably proper marketing and
In some
exposure.
cases, and just a chance.
And just a chance.
And just
So we're going to take a second break, but I really want us to look at this idea of disruptors in the digital economy. And we have a clip from the ECCB, the governor of the ECCB, and he's speaking about Airbnb, the shared economy, which is part of the digital economy, the new economy. And so we'll look at that when we return. So we're discussing the digital economy. When we return, we will continue our discussion. Thank you.
Cette lisi ka registre vers min corona ek I ka fait mouvement ek an chay vitesse tan chaque canef ka kouye pour diligence publique la fait wolo parler en place publique kon bol en main base ti boutique changer distance sociale 6 pieds hod yon a lot I ka travay tan si ou senti ko pa cordial quarantine ko patwe en contact et puis l'autre en cas ou te tope exposé c'est un ekouye free 11 ou ben n'importe clinique yo pou les pays a dimi à clé ça veut dire les supermarkets pharmacie et puis ATM yo accessible avant c'était souhait pays à clé en plein ça veut dire tout bagay fermé à 24 heures servi protocole comme sorti par bureau indication santé nous tout ensemble ça sauver vers min corona si nous tout servi jidla à toutes les
Together let us win this war. Said we shall be a soldier. Together we can beat this corona.
In an effort to ensure patient and first responder safety, the St. Lucia Fire Service has reviewed its patient transfer procedures, especially for patients with respiratory distress. Face masks will be provided. At no time during transportation should the face mask be removed. Please be patient and cooperative during this time to ensure you receive the best possible care while keeping our first responders safe.
Well, Airbnb is seen as a market disruptor, and so it poses challenges for the established hotels and guest houses on the island, not only of St. Lucia, but throughout the ECCU, because it is something that is growing at a very rapid pace. And so this is something that we have to pay attention to, because it will have repercussions for the hotels as we know them. It is possible that in a few years, some of the hotels that we know now may no longer be in business because of the potential of Airbnb. So this is something that we have to look at very closely. We have to ensure that it's properly monitored and properly regulated, because again, it's a source of revenue for the government.
Our view is that we need to ensure that it gets the requisite support, and support means a combination of incentives and an appropriate legal and regulatory framework, both. I think there's clearly a role for Airbnb in our hospitality sector. That is likely to continue to grow. That presents opportunities for our people to benefit more. I mean, we like to talk about tourism being everybody's business. This presents an opportunity for everybody to get a share of that pie, if you will.
We think Airbnb would have a lot of knock-on effects. So for persons who have to expand their homes, build a new room, or renovate the existing homes, it'll obviously have an impact on the construction sector, because blocks would have to be purchased, cement, steel, and so forth. New furnishing, so it'll impact the retail and wholesale sectors. When these persons come on island, they tend to spend money, because the value proposition behind Airbnb is to come live like a local, right? Live like a local. So when they come here, they rent cars, they go all over throughout the length and breadth of St. Lucia. They want to experience St. Lucia, and to experience St. Lucia, you have to spend some money, right? So we believe that there'll be a lot of ripple knock-on effects on various sectors. The banking sector stands to benefit as well. The ECCU arrangement stands to benefit through a further accumulation of foreign reserves.
Obviously, there are implications for the development of anything. You want to make sure it's orderly, you want to make sure it's planned, you want to make sure that the image of St. Lucia to the world is properly conveyed. So you have to ensure that you look at the issue of quality assurance, you look at standards, and you look at support and incentives for local people to be able to participate and benefit from the sector.
Some persons fear that there may be a dilution in the quality of the tourists that come to St. Lucia as a result of Airbnb, that they may not be as discerning, they may not respect the environment as much. They tend to be young, very adventurous travelers, right, tourists. And so there's this fear that maybe St. Lucia could lose its place as the #1 destination for honeymoon tourism in the world, right? So there's that fear, and it's a legitimate fear. And so this is one of the reasons why we are proposing that the industry be properly regulated, that certain minimum standards are set so as to preserve St. Lucia's image in the world as the best honeymoon destination in the world. Right? There are also possible impacts on key resources, electricity, water, there's extra garbage disposal. So there are these things. And there's also, in St. Lucia context, the housing deficit, as was brought to my attention this morning, that it may contribute to the housing deficit. It may lead to a further increase in the price of land, of construction. Right? So these are things that we have to look at, and this is where the policymakers have a role to play to ensure that they get ahead of these issues before they become a problem, that they put measures in place to ensure that persons have access to land at a reasonable price, and that the influx of new Airbnb establishments does not negatively impact the ability of persons to gain access to land and to build a home.
We don't come to this simply from a position of taxation. That is something that ultimately the government will have to consider. But for us, it's an interesting area, it's a happening area. It directly impacts tourism and hospitality. It directly impacts development. Ultimately, they all have connections to the financial system, so we have an interest. We're curious.
So there is a clear view that a new aspect of the digital economy, which is the shared economy, Airbnb, Uber. They are, in a sense, disruptors to the traditional economy. As was said, if it's not monitored or regulated properly, you could actually have the closure of hotels. Do you hold that view that the digital economy is a disruptor, or does it enhance the traditional economy? I don't know if you want to take this question first.
Yeah.
I mean, you did indicate that there are an increase in jobs, so it may not be disrupting the number of jobs. What does it really disrupt?
Okay, as I indicated earlier, that we see that the digital economy is working hand in hand with traditional sectors. So it can be a disruptor, as we've seen happen in many cases. And one of the examples that we spoke about was Amazon replacing traditional shopping and online banking and so on. So we see these things happening. But what I can say is that I believe that traditional sectors or businesses need to be able to embrace the technology, look at the processes, look at the areas where they can create efficiencies in order to serve the customers. So at the end of the day, it's your customer. How can I serve my customer better? I mean, I'm in business to make a profit. So how can I serve my customer better to make a profit, to be competitive, and to be competitive in the whichever industry that I'm in? So I think that that's one way they can protect themselves in terms of being competitive, embracing the technology, and looking at the processes. And so then you won't really have to worry too much about businesses disrupting you. You can disrupt yourself, basically, as a business in your sector. But yes, there are lots of disruptions happening in the economy, and that's just the nature of life.
But the hotels are actually having a real problem with Airbnb, because you no longer have to book the traditional way.
I don't know that we as from a standpoint as an economy need to be, or maybe the hotels might be, because anything that's a competition to your business is competition. You're always concerned about competition. But let's think about our economy. Right? I think that there are different market segments for different types of tourists. And the tourist that wants to go sit at a resort is not necessarily the same type of tourist that wants to go rent a house in the middle of a community somewhere and walk around. So maybe what we found is that we found a tourist that we might not have received before. Right?
But isn't this just a price factor?
Well, I mean,
many cases?
In many cases it's a price factor. It might be a price factor for them, right? But it's a completely different type of experience as well. And my understanding that the tourism is an experience business. It's about creating that type of environment. You have structured resort environments where it's all about health and wellness and exercise. Others where it's all about entertainment, and you have different types of hotel experiences. This is perhaps maybe get more the adventure tourism type of individual. The nature tourism type of individual might be more interested in an Airbnb type of scenario. So I don't think it should be seen necessarily as taken away from the traditional hotels, but rather bringing in other types of consumers that may not be able to afford those hotels, or may not like that a particular type of experience. And in the meantime, we're creating new sectors of our tourism economy, allowing people to be able to maybe perhaps afford a home that they could not have afforded before, because there's some revenue coming from that, and be able to pay a gardener and pay somebody to do a guide. For example, I know people down in the South doing that, where they have community guides, right? And they pay the community taxi person. Somebody runs a taxi cab next door.
So there are cottage linkage industries.
There are linkages. So, I think that in as much as the platform Airbnb, in my view, is something maybe we could have for ourselves, but the idea behind that type of platform is not something that we should be threatened by. I don't think so. I mean, from an economic perspective, I don't think so. So I expect any hotel to be concerned, but that's.
But I have two cable and wireless former guys there, and I know at one point there was a fear of WhatsApp.
Well, exactly, that's where we're going to go, right?
And so even the companies were trying to see how they could either prevent it or get persons to pay for it, and it became a disruptor because there was real income being lost.
Listen, disruptors has been around for a long time.
Always.
So it's been there. The transportation industry has been disrupted. Yeah, and technology, more often than now, are disrupting a lot more stuff. But we've seen disruption for years. right? And in telecoms, you're correct. When I worked for Cable and Wireless, there was this issue about net to phone being taxed, right? Because Cable and Wireless was paying tax on the revenue, but people had those net to phone boxes and was able to make IP calls, and they were not being, the government was not getting anything out of it. So there was a move across the OECS through ECTEL and the NTRC to find a way of taxing the net to phone business. I don't think they were ever able to succeed in doing this. And look, right now, voice is all across the internet. When I worked for Cable and Wireless, the majority of Cable and Wireless revenue came from voice on the fixed line.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see what the P&L look like right now with no voice data.
I remember that, because
you know?
I worked in finance, so I remember that.
Absolutely, so you'll probably remember that. And right now, the network is a data network. It's no longer a voice network. So packets are being transferred across the network, primarily for data, right? We use voice and video over it. So Cable Wireless did not die, right?
So how you manage the disruption?
You have to manage the disruption. You have to take advantage of what's happening right now. And if we go back to Airbnb and how it's disrupting, it's only rooms the hotels are selling, right? And if I'm selling a room below my house in an apartment, right, and I'm creating that sort of experience, right, it's just slightly different to what the hotel is selling.
I was about to correct you and tell you they're selling an experience now, not rooms. So don't.
Well, exactly. So it's an experience you sell. I mean, you have people down in the countryside who would rent space in a shack on a farm, you know, or people are using containers and create an experience in the mountains and all that sort of stuff. And that's, people are looking for all that sort of experience out there. I do not think hotels will eventually disappear. I honestly do not think so. There are customers out there who would go out and they want the experience of a hotel, a 5-star hotel. You know, Airbnb do not offer that. But you will continue to see people use the technology to disrupt various industries.
But I think the hotels themselves are also taking advantage of Airbnb. A number of them have actually put themselves on.
And exactly. But that's the way. That's the only way. Yes.
When we
you take advantage of what's there.
Precisely. When we define the term digital economy in the start, what we're saying is basically you're using the technology to basically enhance what we were already doing, right? So we're using technology.
You cannot fight it.
You cannot fight it. So you use the technology to enhance, and I think that's where all of the change management comes in. I think most times we really have to look at it from a top-down approach, as opposed to a bottom-up approach. We now need to look. We talk about retooling and reskilling, etc. But we now need to look at our leaders and our managers, right? The persons in charge of these, so the general managers of the hotels and all of the different industries, and really ensure that these persons are on board with technology. They understand, because they are the ones who are going to lead the change in the organization, right? So when we talk about retooling, reskilling, yes, we need to retool and reskill at the bottom, but we really have to start from the top. The change must start from the top. Persons must buy into it. And of course, you could come up with, be innovative, and that's what it encourages persons to be innovative. So yes, your business will be disrupted, but how can we improve? What can we do to make ourselves more competitive, more efficient, etc.? And really, that's what the digital economy is about.
Well, and I think the digital economy has to start with a vision. And as Sherilyn indicated,
is it a national vision?
It has to be a national vision, articulated from the very top. And we need to identify very clear and specific goals, right, to be achieved within a specific period of time. And digital economy and the digital space is moving very, very fast. So we have to get on board. We will never be left out. We just have to join where we are, you know, where the technology is. But you have to be prepared. And if you decide to opt out and do not join, your business will be dead. Your government will be defunct. Your people will be defunct. You know, we have to get on board at some point. But it must start with a very, very clear vision. That is what we want, you know, our country to look like. This is what our economy ought to look like. Computers in every single classroom at a very, very, very early age. People who are not at school should be trained on using computers, because I mean, we are the customers of the government service. If we are not trained to use that service, it will not be used, right? So we have to encourage people and probably incentivize people to get involved. As far as I'm concerned, every single business, regardless of sector, have to be participating in that space. The agriculturists have to be in there. You know, the farmers have to be in there. You know, we can create a farmers marketplace. So I run a hotel and I want to know what product is available on the market and which farmer has it. I should simply be able to go on a digital a farmers marketplace and see the farmer down in Choiseul.
But who leads this? Who should lead something like this? Is it
Well,
government,
I mean,
or is it a...
Quickly alluded to some minute. We need to have a roadmap, a vision,
Clear
a
vision.
structure that's over 5 years. Yeah, we have to go in here 2-3 year spans.
It cannot be 5 years. It has to be 3 years because you have to revisit it.
But in terms of
in
terms of the overall vision, we have to go across governments. We have to have long-term strategy plans. That we have to have chunks of 2 and 3 years in terms of the goals and that we have to meet. So no matter who comes into power, no matter what the direction, this is what direction the country needs to go, right? These are the kind of things that we have to do, and other countries have done.
So who leads? I would say government has begun to set up the enabling environment. So we have done a lot of work in putting together the enabling environment. And so some of the work that Department of Public Sector Modernization is doing, that is part of this enabling environment. And we've continued to further that through the, this new project that we have coming on stream, the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, where we're going to be looking at the regulatory environment for telecommunications, digital financial services, as well as looking at things like data protection and privacy, cybersecurity, and so on, as well as further strengthening government infrastructure. So this enabling environment is being created. However, we need to have partnership with the private sector, partnership with civil society, basically, in order to now this environment is there, now you have to do your part in order to, take on board the things that are being offered. So even for that project as well, we're looking at digital skills and technology adoption. So how you have your workforce ready. So we have, this project is going to look at adoption of digital technologies within sectors that we have decided would be priority sectors for the country. So tourism would be one of them, agriculture, and other sectors. And as you said earlier on, Cheryl, looking at the managerial, those who are the managers. So that there will be training for those managers as well. Looking at the business advisory services. There will be some type of matching grants that will probably be given to assist in the incubators that Pinkley spoke about in terms of supporting the work that is going on the ground. And how do we support internship, apprenticeship programs in that very same area, looking at job placement and so on, and also some type of co-working spaces to be created as part of that program that we're going to be bringing on board. So there's a lot of opportunities that are being created, but we need to be able to take advantage of that. We need to be able to partner with the government as they create the enabling environment.
I think also Ian mentioned something about the longevity of programs, so that when you plan, it doesn't mean whichever government comes in, it could be moved away, because I think that start-stop hasn't really been good for our country in terms of the lack of continuity. So when you have programs like this, and Fiona, I think this program is going to be rolled off very soon.
Yes,
in terms of from this year.
Hopefully from September of this year. And this program, actually, we started working on this pre-COVID. And after what happened with the crisis, we realized it's needed even more now than ever. And we had to do some tweaking in this program so that we could have responded to the needs that were identified because of the crisis. And how do we create more resilience within our economy, and how do we bring in the digital environment, we embrace it further. But I just wanted to put a plug in before you continue for the Ministry of Education. Before I came here, I got a list of some of the ICT projects that they've been doing in education even before COVID. And so I think that had enabled them to be able to say, okay, fine, we can have the online classes, although they had to do a lot of work to get everybody on board. But I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, because the Moodle platform that
the
was
Moodle
spoken
platform
of.
and so on, yes.
So we've been speaking about the digital economy and how it really is something that we cannot avoid. The ECCB has mentioned the introduction very soon, hopefully, of the digital dollar. We already have cashless systems, and what has happened? What happened during COVID when persons were locked down for a while? They couldn't access banks, they needed monies. How does a digital dollar, a cashless system operate? Do you think that this is where we have to go? And those businesses that only rely, because in our community businesses, you can't do cashless transactions for most of them. You have to bring cash. Do you think that they will be squeezed out if they do not adjust?
Well, my view on whether a digital economy can grow and develop without a digital, fully digital currency, as they call it, right? Most time when people talk about digital currency, they think we're talking about Bitcoin necessarily and that sort of thing. We're not necessarily talking about Bitcoin, one form of it, but for example, with the DXCD, the digital EC dollar, which I guess it's a little behind now, but the central bank is trying to launch at some point in time. The idea that it's needed to grow a digital economy, I don't think so. Right? I think it's useful, but as it stands right now, we have $1 trillion of trade going on through the digital currency, through the digital economy without digital currency.
The online transactions.
People have credit cards, people have debit cards, people have ways of spending money without an actual digital currency. Right? Now that being said, adding a digital currency as an additional option for being able to conduct transactions will be useful and will improve on our ability to conduct these types of transactions. Right? But it will continue, whether or not the digital currencies are ready to be launched or not. It will continue. As it stands right now, with COVID-19 forcing our hand in some ways, people have found very ingenious ways of making their money. Collecting their money, they're going out with their credit card machines, people paying for it on delivery. The COD now includes cash, checks, and credit cards being paid with those portable credit card machines, as an example. Right? People have launched websites, web applications, where they take online payments. It's not an easy thing to do, I know, right now, which is a whole other discussion, but some people have managed to find some way of getting their online payments to take place, right? So people are doing it even without a digital currency being in place.
Well, I think it's just correct, Ian, for a moment. There's a difference between a digital currency and a cashless system, right? So the digital currency would fall within the blockchain environment, right? And a cashless system is where we are right now. Right. And a cashless system is definitely supporting the digital economy. We'll eventually evolve into the blockchain and Bitcoin and that sort of stuff. I mean, Facebook is working on their digital currency, but it still has a long way to go, right, I believe. But the cashless system is what we have right now and what we should encourage. So you will see sort of peer-to-peer type cash systems being developed, right? But right now you use your credit card or your debit card to pay for something, right?
But you see, that's where I want to come into with you here, and I want to ask, what is there? I was having a little discussion earlier about this cashless system and with and also the digital currency. Is there going to be an advantage in persons paying for services with a digital dollar because you have a reduction in charges, unlike a credit card, 20% if you on it and stuff like this, and the percentage is higher depending on which bank. Wouldn't it squeeze out credit cards if it's the proliferation of the digital currency is?
But of course, that's another disruptor. You know, digital currency is going to be another disruptor, and the banks will have to adapt to that new way of conducting business. Yep. But even before the digital currency, the peer-to-peer type payment that you're seeing, I mean, you look at in China, nobody walks around with money, right? So you have Alibaba has the Alipay platform. WeChat has the peer-to-peer payment platforms. So people cut out the bank most of the time. All you do is load up money on your digital wallet, and I can transfer money to you and pay. We cut out the bank charges that are being placed on the use of your credit card. And again, the more people you get on the platform, the cheaper it becomes. You know, even with the banks, as a merchant, if your volumes are higher, there's a tendency to negotiate your rates down a little lower with them. So as we get more people on the platform and people start to use, and I wouldn't say digital currency, but cashless systems, more or less, in the first instance, the use of this system will force banks to reduce the charges, because eventually the credit card.
But the cashless system is causing them to increase their profits, because you have services that they will charge for.
Well, it will increase profit for everybody, even as a shop owner, right? If you're not paying bank charges and you have a cashless system, you have a tendency to increase your profit as well.
For your government, will government stand to benefit from digital currencies and the proliferation as well?
I just wanted to indicate, because even in terms of ECCB launching this digital Eastern Caribbean dollar, just to indicate that they're currently piloting it across four countries, and St. Lucia is one of the countries of which they're piloting it. And if I could, as we look and we move towards that digital government platform, really and truly, that digital currency will allow for more inclusion. Because persons will be able to convert cash to digital money and then be able to conduct transactions online. So for example, pay for some of the services that we're going to put online. When you look at it, and if I just want to quote something from the ECCB in terms of where they see the digital dollar, and basically it says here that the region is being thrust to the forefront of financial technology, and the potential benefits of the current digital currency are many, for the banks, for the vendors, and for the customers. Aside from the lower reliance on cash and a reduction in overall transaction costs, a secure, resilient digital payment and settlement platform is expected to have a net positive effect on the financial services across the region. So really and truly, government, well, like I said, St. Lucia is one of the pilot sites, and we have had some preliminary discussions in terms of how to get government to be part of this pilot, especially with that DigiGov platform, yes, to see whether we could perhaps pilot it there as well going forward.
I like where you have brought us to, and we go to, as we go to our break, and you talked about resilience and security, and so we want to talk about this as well. But when we come back as well, we'll be opening up the line so that we could accept your calls. So join us on the other side of the break.
Because of how quickly the coronavirus spreads, each new case calls for increased public vigilance. Know what is happening, understand why, and comply. Think of the protocols as war tactics. Personal protection tactics. Keep 6 feet away from others. Avoid riding the bus, gathering on beaches, in bars, and shops. Public protection tactics. Quarantine yourself if you feel fluish in case you have been exposed. Call 311 or a respiratory clinic for advice. Country tactics. Partial lockdown. Supermarkets, small grocers, pharmacies, and ATMs are accessible before curfew. Total lockdown. Everywhere stays closed 24/7 for a stipulated period. Team tactics. Don't only follow the protocols, be a protocols police. Let's win this.
Together let us win this war. Said we shall be a soldier. Together we can beat this corona.
Hello and welcome back. We're discussing the digital economy and all its impacts for St. Lucia, and how St. Lucia could take advantage of this as we move forward on this road to the recovery from COVID-19. And before we left, we were talking about resilience, security. How secure is this digital economy? How safe is it? Many persons are fearful that they could lose everything with one click of a mouse, somebody could steal all their money. They could lose business. Ian, I know you're that IT solution expert. What assurance would you give persons that this digital economy is actually a safe economy? And let me just indicate to our persons out there that our phone lines are also opened. And the number, let me get that number. The number is 468-2162 to join us, 468-2162.
Right. So, well, I mean, I understand people's concerns. We've had examples of data breaches and hacks and some of the largest companies. It happened, around the world, where, whether it's a simple matter of a data breach or actual destruction of data, whatever the case may be, access to credit card information. I don't know that there's ever going to be a time when there's no kind of breach happening. There's going to be this constant battle between people trying to secure systems and people trying to break into systems. And they're going to continue to work on those things. What's important is that people understand a lot of those, what we call breaches in your personal information, it has to do with your own behavior, your own activities. People choosing simple passwords, writing them down, people finding them, storing them in places where they can be found. Most of the time, when we talk about a breach in somebody's, financial data, it has to do with their own behavior as opposed to a hacker being successful in accessing that information, right? Somebody coming and taking your credit card when you're paying for something at a restaurant, and they take it and they walk away and they go make some sort of scan or copy of your credit card, take down your information. That is how most breaches take place.
Let me just hold that point 1 second. I think we have our first call.
Okay.
So let me say welcome, caller.
Yes, good night. Yeah, as we have moved to the giving instructions through virtual classrooms because of the COVID-19 crisis, a situation has arisen where you have many students who don't have access to the internet. Either they don't have the broadband capability at home, or they don't have the actual devices to get to the internet. So just wondering whether the Universal Service Fund, which is available through the Excel member states, can be accessed quickly to actually ensure that we give, those students and their parents access to broadband through MiFi devices in the shortest possible time. Because to me, we really put that segment of the society, those students, at a disadvantage if they cannot participate in virtual learning. Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
Contribution.
So, any of you want to mention? I'm not sure if we.
Okay, I can just take a stab. I'm not sure if Sherilyn wants to talk about it, but I think that we have understood that this is a situation. There are many students who do not have IT connections. They do not have internet connections. Sorry, they do not have access to devices or laptops so that they can do the work. And we have been working with the Ministry of Education in order to solve that problem, at least in the area of the laptops and so on. So I think I cannot give too much details, but just to say that efforts are being made to work with the Ministry of Education to source some of those laptops. Even up until Friday, we were discussing that. So but in terms of internet connections, I'm not too sure with regards to that one. But with regards to accessing some laptops, I think the important thing would be to identify the children who are affected, basically. And
because what we even heard from the principal of the Cassius Comprehensive School, 90% of her students are online, and they're actually seeking out those who haven't access. And some elements of that interview was not placed there, but she said some of them are just probably not interested. So you have those sort of things as well. But also there is a divide. So Sherilyn, I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
I guess when it comes to, I think part of the GINet. Remember we had the GINet where provision of public Wi-Fi across the length and breadth of St. Lucia. So we have started, like I said, across 5 communities. We're hoping to at least roll it out to another 6 communities. It may not be able to reach everybody, but at least it may provide some level of access. I know that via the, I know we've not discussed it, but via the CASI project, We have provided internet, I think via the Ministry of Social Transformation, to the community centers across the different. So perhaps some consideration. I know there are some community centers who are actually equipped with computers. So perhaps consideration could be given to using these community centers to access.
And I think COVID will force persons to, as I said, it creates a new normal, a new reality, and allows us to refocus. So let me just stop you here. We have a call. Let's just hello, caller.
Yes, hello. Yes, hello. Hello.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I just want to go back to the resilience and security that was spoken about. In terms of legislation, what is it that is in place from a legislative standpoint to protect individuals if and when data breaches do occur? Because we know in a digital economy, data breaches will occur. And when it does occur, what is there? Are we prepared from a legal standpoint to protect our citizens when these things happen? If the police have to get involved, are the police well trained? What are the laws that are going to be put in place, if there are any? And what is it that they're going to do to prepare us for something such as this when it comes on board?
Yes, I guess legislation is very broad because you do have legislation even for social media. They could come after you on social media now, but anything else pertaining
to go a little beyond the legislation for treated with social media. I think there's a need for the Electronic Transaction Act, and I believe that is what the caller is alluding to. I am aware that there's a program throughout the OECS. As far as I understood, St. Lucia is probably the only country that's been left behind or has not been further afield in implementing. But to protect operators within the digital space, we need the Electronic Transaction Act to be in place to support and protect consumers. What exists now in terms of defamation on Facebook will not suffice. Somebody conduct business online and they're defrauded or there's some dispute, we need to have proper laws enacted to support that sort of situation. Yeah.
Is there any legislation that's already governing that particular sector? Because that's not a new sector.
To date, we have the Data Protection Act, we have the Computer Misuse Act, and the Electronic Transaction Act, all of which have already been enacted. And as part of the digital transformation program, we're also going to be reviewing some of the other legal frameworks and updating them as necessary. But we do have a few that's already enacted that we could actually refer to, which speaks to most of the questions of privacy and security, etc. So they have already passed.
And I want to go back to the question. The person who asked the question about the access to internet actually had a two-part question and spoke about the Universal Service Fund, whether it can be accessed. I think that is something we should explore. I believe that I will put that forward when I go to the office, but I think that's something that could be explored to see how they can assist in providing the connections that students who don't have access can get.
That the caller who made the point with regards to the Universal Service Fund is right on point. When that fund was set up, it was to provide services in areas that is not profitable for the service provider. So this money was being collected to subsidize the provision of service within those areas. Now, my days in telecom, I recall services required in remote areas was fixed line service. To date, no one has a fixed line at their home. What is required is internet. And I believe, and I'm not sure if it's been done right now, we need to check it out and see what the fund is being used for right now. And the caller might be right. That fund should probably be used to provide internet service outside of the GINet and the CASIP network in areas where internet is not available to people.
And also the provision of devices, as he alluded to.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I think I missed out on one. I think you indicated about the E-Transaction Act.
Yes.
So the Data and E-Transaction Act, I think, will be effective come 1st of June this year.
Okay.
So while we wait another caller, this has been a question that has been all pervasive over the internet, and I'll go for it this way. The digital economy brings with it robotics, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality, requiring a workforce that is advanced. Will it mean a smaller workforce altogether, and can it drive up unemployment numbers? I know we mentioned some of that already, but do you see any threat for artificial intelligence, robotics, virtual reality, and are there any negative effects for government?
I want to take this one, right? I'm sure you are aware of the BPO sector and our efforts at Invest in Lucia to develop and grow that sector. So one of the...
Say what BPO is for the rest of...
Okay, so our business process outsourcing, which is called Center, which is what most people would probably refer it to. We have Ojo Labs in Viewfort that was set up by Invest in Lucia. Ojo Lab is more than just a call center, but rather a knowledge processing outsourcing center. And what is being done there is training young people to manage and train artificial intelligence that is out there selling real estate, right? And
artificial intelligence that is selling real estate.
Correct, yes. And we can have a discussion on artificial intelligence for the sake of the viewers who do not understand what it is, right? But a lot of stuff is being done in the artificial intelligence space right now. Like, for instance, a mortgage is being processed through artificial intelligence, so the software can determine your suitability for a mortgage without somebody actually going through the process with you. The real estate industry is using artificial intelligence to sort of streamline and single out potential buyers. So you will not waste time on people who are just shopping around, but you zero in on people who are real potential buyers. And what the center in Viewfort is doing is developing that software, right? Training the software to learn people habits, right? And so we spoke up, and I made that point to say we worried about loss of jobs. But 5 years ago, we did not have that sort of facility in St. Lucia or anywhere in the world where people are training AI software, right? So my view...
Wouldn't it mean a loss of jobs for persons who do traditional selling?
Well, and that is where we come back to the whole education thing. To support a proper digital economy, we need education. It is critical that we train people, right?
And retool.
And retool people. Because even with security you spoke about, unless people are trained and taught how to use the technology, right, there will be problems. There's certain stuff you have to look out for. Security is key in everything you do. Even physical space, brick and mortar, you need security. And in the digital space, you need to understand how security works. Even like you spoke about, you have a credit card and you give it to somebody at a restaurant and they walk to the back. That is a bigger threat than you putting your credit card online if you know what you're doing. Yeah. Because they can walk at the back and you don't know what they're doing if your credit card at the back.
But yeah, I'm always worried about when you issue that credit card to somebody to pay for stuff.
Yeah, and they walk away with it.
Yeah,
but if you're paying something online, it's actually more secure, right? But there's certain things you have to look for before you decide to put your credit card online.
Exactly. Now, I also want to touch on the issue of jobs and the potential loss of jobs. Even aside from retraining people in the next few years, having a more tech-savvy workforce, etc. Currently, the move in certain directions creates additional jobs in traditional industries at times. Here's an example. COVID-19 comes about, all of a sudden everybody's selling their stuff online or WhatsApp or whatever. Do you realize that has created an avid delivery service industry?
Absolutely.
That we did not have, right? Drivers, the people who are helping them out on their routes, right? That's created that type of scenario, right? When now you have these people who are putting up these platforms online or these individual websites for selling stuff, they now have salespeople. They now have a couple of people that they pay and they hired, right? Jobs are created as byproducts. Industries are created as byproducts, right? Even for example, there's a platform my own company is putting out. I won't plug it in here right now. But one of the other than delivery, other byproducts of that would be that there'll be people who will be assisting companies in getting their businesses online, getting their products online, updating and refreshing, right? That did not exist before. So sometimes, we need to understand that in as much as we have to responsibly adjust to technology, don't leave people out because they don't have email or they can't use a computer, that we have no other form of interacting with those customers. And not because we don't necessarily have the most high-tech workforce at this point in time. It means that every job that's created has to be a high-tech job. But sometimes just something embrace the technology and move in that direction. It creates opportunities that were not there before.
Because just the online purchasing of items, the number of companies that have sprung up, and they're hiring a full workforce. They need drivers, they need customs brokers, and the whole works. And the government makes more revenue because there's greater transactions.
Exactly.
I can tell you our business of the year, which is sponsored by Invest and Lucia, is a small business, online business down in Choiseul called Shop the Caribbean, right? And during COVID, his business really sprung up, right? He was selling goods to people all around the island online. He was sitting at his desk managing the orders, and he was able to bring in people to fulfill the orders with him, do all the deliveries, right? Packaging. That never existed, right?
So let me just hold that point. Let me introduce our caller. Caller, thank you for waiting.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
My question on the digital economy has to do, and I think the gentleman from Invest and Lucia was talking about artificial intelligence. And if you look at some of the ways artificial intelligence has been implemented, for example, in the US justice system uses artificial intelligence to be able to decide on court cases, and they are finding that certain racial biases in how the software itself makes certain decisions. And one of the issues is that a lot of the software programmers who wrote the artificial intelligence coding are of a certain race. And so you find certain racial biases in that. And also, a lot in our digital economy, we tend to import a lot of the technology, and as somebody pointed out, we re-implement it. So how do we view our participation in that digital economy with care for the racial biases that are associated with us importing technology as versus growing the technology ourselves?
Thank you, Paul. I think
Sharon alluded to a point earlier on that it's not a cookie cutter, right? It's not everything that would fit your environment. So if we are going to implement AI systems within our society, it has to be tailored and designed for our environment. We cannot go and buy an AI system off the shelf and expect it to be implemented here. I mean, you can take the technology down a little lower and say, tax systems, payroll systems, has to be tailored for our tax environment. We cannot buy a payroll or even an accounting system that manages VAT differently to the way we manage our VAT here. So the same would apply to an artificial intelligence system.
You customize it.
It has to be customized for the environment.
I think he's talking more about the threat that artificial intelligence could be used in that negative way as well.
I've seen some of what he's talking about. I saw from, I guess, not so dangerous, but kind of hilarious, where you have situations where the hand dryers would recognize the palm of your hand, not the back of your hand, because the back of your hand is dark, because it's made for people with lighter skin, right? That's one example of a bit hilarious, but it shows a certain bias in the way things are developed. There's also a situation where certain races, in terms of facial recognition systems, not recognizing certain races as well as they recognize others, and being used in law enforcement, and as a result, wrongfully convicting or I should say, getting people charged based on their profile, whereas the systems are not properly recognizing them, right? If they were light skinned or they were white, the white features, not just your skin color, but your features, your bone structure, all these things. The Caucasian structure is much better recognized and understood, and it could differentiate between people.
The system was developed around it.
Right. So it's how the system is trained. You speak about the artificial intelligence and before they train in the system. It's a matter of training the systems. Another example is accent. Speaking to systems to recognize a voice command can be a task depending on how you speak, because it is not originally trained. But the thing about a lot of these systems is that they can be trained to recognize and to understand. But it takes the programmers, those driving it, not just the programmers, the people making the financial decisions about it, to decide that this is the direction that we have to go and this is the market that we have to serve, right? And to take care of these biases out of the system. But
so we have our final caller. Caller, welcome.
Good evening, Glenn. Good evening, ladies. Good evening, gentlemen.
Welcome.
I was looking forward to this session this evening. Thanks a lot for the input. Obviously, it's a very broad area, and there are many angles that you can approach it from. For me, I wanted, if you would just go through maybe the top 3 areas that perhaps a typical solution can take part of benefit from the digital economy, and outside of government services. And for that, what are some of the things that they could do? For me, I've been frustrated with the ease of setting up an e-commerce platform. In a couple of weeks, we have a team of people. We'll be launching a platform called GetIt, GETIT.LC, and it's a platform that connects service providers and people who want service. For example, a plumber, carpenter, a babysitter, a cleaner. So that's one way, I want to be part of that digital economy. But it's been very difficult getting an e-commerce account. Thankfully, we're on our way, hopefully by the end of this week, facilitated by a local bank. But go back to my official question. What are the top 3 ways you think typical solution can benefit from the digital economy, and what are some of the steps that they can take to get there? Thank you.
So we ran out of time, so who wants to take that question?
But
the top 3 ways.
To add, and to support the call on one of the points he made, and we haven't discussed it at all, but the banks here has to be on board to facilitate digital economy. A number of applications are available go to market, but you cannot get a bank to set up an e-commerce account for you, a merchant account. And without a local merchant account for our local banks, we are spinning top in mud. We have to go out to get an account outside of St. Lucia to facilitate that process. So that is something that should be on the top of our agenda, to get the banks to release the processes and what is required to get it going.
Do it, but it's not affordable and it's a frustrating process.
So for it to be successful, we need the banks. It is key. It's critical. Get the banks on board to facilitate that process. Without that, we will be retarding that whole process going forward.
But to answer the gentleman's question about ways to benefit from the digital economy, which he has already mentioned one way. He's setting up a platform.
Exactly.
Right, he's setting up a platform. He identified a need, right? Putting people together. I've heard about this platform. He's identified a need, and he set up an e-commerce platform to support that. And he has the stresses of getting it online, but he's having some level of success, so good for him. But we have seen people taking advantage of the digital economy through social media, as an example. People have set up Facebook groups and have benefited from thousands and thousands of members in their groups, and they find ways to generate revenue by maybe featuring certain posts, right, and other things that they do. So that's another way that people can benefit from at least e-commerce without having through social media, I should say, right?
So let me come in here, and we're into.
Just wanted to clarify just one thing in terms of what Pinkley indicated with regards to the banks. I know it can be it's a long process. However, we have been making strides with the local banks. For example, for the DigiGov platform, I think as of last week, government was able to receive its approval from one of the banks here for its merchant ID. So it's possible, but again, it's a time-consuming process, and perhaps they need to look at ways in terms that they could make the process a bit more efficient. But it's possible.
That large businesses or government will be able to get a merchant account from a bank. We're talking about the typical small business. How are they going to get a merchant account from the bank when they're looking for a security deposit? Especially the payment gateway services are very expensive. We pay about almost $600 a month just to have a merchant account and a payment gateway.
So I guess maybe perhaps by raising that demand, then perhaps we could then have that kind of
raise demand.
That I mean, raise the demand for the services.
So the discussion has to be
make
had,
it a bit more competitive.
You have to have the discussion with the banks.
With the banks.
And if there's a demand for it, and I know for a fact there's a demand for it, it should drive the price down.
We've been having this discussion with the bank for a long time. They're raising the issue of risk, and they're saying that credit card transactions are risky, and especially online credit card transactions are more risky. Yes, I get it. But at the end of the day, isn't it a business model where you're supposed to look for volume, balance out that risk, reduce the cost? There's always a risk, right? Carrying your cash is a risk. You have to pay for that. You understand? So at the end of the day, I feel like what Pinkley is saying is really, really, really important. We must have the financial institutions on board, making it more affordable and easier for a typical small business to be able to acquire a merchant account, working with the payment gateway service providers to make it something that's reasonable for people to do, right? In the meantime, we're going to innovate and try to work around that using the payment aggregators, like you mentioned earlier, putting out our own platform, find ways to get people online without having to deal with that sort of thing, right? And, but in the meantime, the banks have to do better, I think.
And that's the benefit
I see Fiona is hungry to say something.
Okay.
And you'll be our last contributor before we close off.
Okay, so I would just say, listening to the discussions with the banks and the merchants accounts and so on, it says to us that this discussion tonight, it's just the tip of the iceberg. I think that we need to continue the discussion on the digital economy. And I think that in continuing that discussion, we need to bring more players on board, like the banks and so on, and more practitioners, and to talk about it. How do we do it? Because we need everybody on board. So I think that we need more discussions like this. Basically, I'm saying. To answer the questions for the gentleman. Top 3 ways, you mentioned some of them, and he himself mentioned some of them, but I also say take advantage of the training that is available for not just him, but just generally. Take advantage. There's a lot of free training available, but you can also take advantage of whatever is being put out there. Take advantage of what is being offered by Invest St. Lucia in terms of the incubators and so on when it's rolled out, and as well as be on the lookout for other programs that are coming on board. So if you take advantage of those programs, you can help build success in your business and so on. I know of young IT persons that have taken advantage of a lot of programs, and they're doing very well. So that's another way that persons can participate in the digital economy.
Okay, so we're right up here with the time already. Leaves me to say thank you to our panel. We've been discussing the digital economy and the many opportunities that it holds for St. Lucia in job creation, economic expansion, education, and the upscaling of skill sets. So thank you for sharing so freely of your expertise with us, with the general public. And we know that we've not exhausted the discussions in any way. And so the digital economy is here, and I think there is a lot of money to be made from it. There are many opportunities, and government, I know, is eager to get it going and to put the systems in place. So thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for those who've been viewing us out there in social media and on NTN and the other platforms. Thank you very much, and good night.